Debating Emoters. Stan Houston for Church of Democratic Enlightenment. I've entitled this talk Debating Emoters to make explicit that I'm talking about people who try to have issues determined by how they individually or sectionally react emotionally to them, or claim to react. This is following up my third democratic foothold and talk on the program Agenda Free Speech at What Cost, my talk being in my series Agenda Free Speech, You Are Silencing Them, 1C Fabrication. That talk dealt with principles of democratic debate in relation to radical feminism, but videos on YouTube of academic staff debating radical feminists students suggest that practical application of principles requires comment. I have the impression that staff members of courage, integrity and of course intellect may be realising that they are trapped in a political crucible with some surprise, thinking they were academics. I'll explain this more. Ideas don't hurt people. The theoretical bottom line here is that ideas don't hurt people, a proposition argued in Fabrication 1C as essential to reason and democratic debate. 1C traverses the objective separation of ideas as products of fact and logic from the personal, the conventional distinction of abuse from ideas, how open-mindedness and the acknowledgement of fallibility incidentally preempt emotional injury, and so on. From what I'm seeing, insistence on the impersonality of ideas is key here. The feminism involved seeks to fabricate injury of an emotional character as a basis of compensatory entitlement and retribution. I think this must be understood as overturning democracy's rational basis in favour of an anti-democratic reversion to emotional elite rule, cognate with the old monarchies or modern dictatorships. The insistence on the objective character of ideas is thus more than a polemical defence mechanism here, rather a basic defence of democracy. Authoritarian emotional power. I need therefore to comment on the remarks of one Yale academic, as far as I could make them out on the video, to the effect that he had a vision which was, as I took it, of enlightenment universal humanity. Confronted as he was by insistence of a student that the student and academic would never be like each other, I think the further explanation of the academic's position needs to be that while the student in question is at liberty to deny any such civic identification or sympathy, such an insistence on difference would imply a breakdown of democracy in favour of authoritarian rule, in which whether the student concerned was of the ruling elite was unpredictable but unlikely. The student and his classmates would more likely live at gunpoint with the people generally. While this is in contemporary circumstances Church of Democratic Enlightenment theory, ascribing the current degeneration of the democracies to lack of an organised, united rule by the people, Code sources it to the fraternity of the French Revolution and Enlightenment, the E pluribus unum motto of the United States, contemporaneously, as I take it, with the French Revolution, and religious teachings, notably of Jesus, that stress neighbourly love or charity as the key to the domestic tranquility of the preamble to the US Constitution. Tone is crucial. To take any sort of emotional tone in these discussions has problems. The dangers associated with the normal human reaction to those showing signs of distress, of sympathy and conciliation, are manifestly enormous. That reaction concedes the emotional character of the exchange of ideas, placing debate immediately on losing ground. It implies that the distress shown is genuine, in the sense of justifiable, rather than a device to extract concessions and compensation for affected injury. For the staff to imagine they are in a genuinely personal exchange rather than a political conflict is to a large and risky degree misguided. Even within code, there are points where one can recognise an enemy for practical purposes. Staff who respond emotionally sell out democracy and its debate, which indicatively must be founded on the objectivity of reason, in a way which does not cancel respect and charitable love for the fellow citizen. I make these comments knowing tone is a matter for individual judgment. So within the confines of the campus debate, I think there is a case for zero emotional response, disregard of anything but the substantive points of difference in their proof, with emotion only perhaps addressed with the conventional nothing personal. I think staff will find that where their emotion feeds emotion in their antagonists, a rather academic, logical reflection will make emotionalism eventually less effective. This may initially mean driving opponents to apoplexy, but I think that supports the strategy. There is a further rhetorical problem with sympathy, that it is a little too passive. I think the sad truth is that politically, if opponents are behaving irrationally or dishonestly, indulging them can only encourage them. The suggested disregard of the emotion does carry the implication that it is silly and phony, but where it comes, as on one video, to objections that the academic is smiling, I think a little fun along the lines of "sorry for enjoying talking to you" illustrates the value of humour in dealing with fanaticism. It all seems to be about ways of never taking the emotionalism seriously, and there, I think, some implacability of spirit is in order. But my job isn't on the line. Arguments in writing. It looks to me as if there will be some on-campus situations where staff, such as I'm describing, might be advised to ask opponents in the friendliest possible way to put their arguments in writing. Clearly, the normal explanation of this is that a written case enables serious consideration and written response. It is theoretically early times on this point for code, but I'm having doubts about the typical form or standard of oral discourse in our society. I think too much tends to be said too loosely in conversation, especially by invention to fill gaps in narrative where we know nothing. The democratic citizen may be different from our present selves, but of course writing demotionalises, eliminates facial expression, body language, tone and volume of voice, and so on. Hitler devoted substantial space in Mein Kampf to the advantages of the spoken word, and I do not think we can doubt that that was because of its benefits for presenting highly emotional, irrational rhetoric. Reasonable standard of injury. The point needs to be made, at risk of stating the obvious, that a claim of emotional injury can only be sustained in terms of a general community standard. In Australia, a law against offensive language, judged against the standard of the minority to which the offended belonged, has only after decades been amended in 2017 to a generally reasonable standard. We had the situation where offendees and other injurees could virtually be judges in their own case, a situation whose persistence in universities would apparently warrant examination. Academic staff in Australia have also compared the closed judicial processes of the universities with totalitarian trials. It seems pretty clear that when violence was extended by various agencies to financial, emotional, etc., a great job creation device for welfare departments, the cost was not only the obvious one, that hopes of drawing a clear line against lethal physical violence were lost, but the door was opened to endless fabrication of injury which could not be disproved. Analyse, don't personalise. I think experience I'm having on Twitter might also be helpful here. The case that comes to mind is that a leadership tendency among Australia's Aboriginal community has emerged advocating an end of victimhood, grievance and concessional dependency in favour of initiative, independence and cultural modernisation. While the grievance mongers are naturally personally abusive, trading on the same emotional victimisation as the campus radical feminists, I find that a stronger approach to dealing with them is just to present them with the crossroads the Aboriginal cause has reached and ask where the grievance on the one hand or self-responsible rapprochement on the other seems the better course. It looks to me as if similar analytic perspectives could be usefully applied to whether the feminist grievance against men offers a more promising future than harmony. Truth will out. Academics who are used to having what they say in lectures simply believed may find that persuasion in the political arena is a different process. In my experience, it is not a process of one-off logical demonstration, but of repetition in the absence of effective refutation. Here, Mill's observation of the durability of true ideas applies. Context. The liberation of barbarism. I think it's essential to put these situations on campus in context, because otherwise the staff I've referred to can't know what they are dealing with. The first comment I'd make is that we have to understand that humans will run to barbarous coercive self-interest with instrumental malice if the conditions favour it. It is one thing for me to say that civilization is the preventative discipline of these instincts, a quite different thing to say that this discipline is always present and that we are always civilised. Janice Fiamengo of Ottawa University has observed how gratifying coercion in the name of moral righteousness must be. But on serious morality, I have grizzled elsewhere that the French revolutionaries may have erred in not appreciating the moral resource of the contemporaneous church, corrupt as it was. A cognate observation was that they needed to stress the essential character of fraternity and avoid Marx's overreaction, again understandable, to early capitalism, the division that's still with us in many ways. Naturally, Marx rejected religion. But now we're looking at the breakdown of the religion whose moral code restrained barbarism, the absolutist and fabricating coercion of radical feminism and other campus ideology. See Agenda Free Speech 1ABC. Lying media, degenerate political parties, and we don't need the bankruptcy of Greece with Italy to follow, the anti-establishment Trump revolt, the fracturing of Europe and the paralysis of Brexit, the resurgence of authoritarianism in Southeast Asia and places like Turkey to tell us democracy is ailing. We can see it on Twitter, in our own societal process, a scramble for money, prestige and elite power over the people's heads. We just seem to be looking at where civil strife makes civil hands unclean, division and feuding, like neglect of the old divine moral order. But there's not going to be any divine retribution whereby all are punished here. No wonder I'm starting a religion of democracy. To the dogfight which our society has become, I'm only going to add one more little factor to explain why, if the moral breakdown has opened the door to barbarism, people might rush through it with guns blazing. The beauty contest. We still haven't got anywhere with the problem of a fixation on physical attractiveness which depersonalises women in all sorts of ways that might lead them to jump at the chance to gun down men. The particularly good-looking ones are molested in various degrees or deceptively led to expect a beauty dividend which actually relies on other personal resources they may lack. The less good-looking ones receive all sorts of signals that they are valueless, losers, whatever other qualities they have. Relationships are more of a mess than ever. Naturally, some women are misandrically vindictive. I'm not saying that justifies their lying and malice where it occurs, just that it's barbarism predictable from the societal circumstances. I mean, men who become sufficiently frustrated by the fiasco of personal relationships and the beauty contest, in particular to bash, rape and kill women, are part of the furniture. I'm not sure why some women wouldn't become destructively hostile to men in the same conditions, even if we do have to eliminate the haters of both genders through some civilised process of reconstruction. Institutional degeneracy. Comment on institutional process affecting some university departments may be useful to academics. I think in a period of real disadvantage and discrimination like leading up to the 1960s, university departments like women's studies are properly set up and help within 30 years to formally eliminate discrimination. They can't be disbanded from bureaucratic self-preservation. Their once radical goals achieved, no longer having valid causes, they must invent new ones. They aren't going to be the consolidation of formal gains in practice, because that lacks the radical interest of the previous generation's goals. Mere equality having no hope of competing with social justice warfare in attracting paying students. What is crucial here is that as soon as the invention of goals, believe women and rape culture, fighting white privilege, etc. begins, the departments concerned must move to emotional processes of persuasion, coercive imposition of what is right, rational persuasion no longer being available. In the agenda program discussed in other talks, Alice McLaughlin, philosophy professor at York University in Canada, is explicit about the disruption and shutdown of talks by opponents being a consequence, among other things, of criticism of staff and their departments. The teachers concerned, naturally wanting to keep their jobs, appear to train emotional goon squads as one method of suppressing opposing ideas. Professor McLaughlin's claim that street protesters properly use every means possible to express their claims presumably encompasses the battles between Nazis and communists in interwar Germany, the usual elitist sellout here of peaceful demonstration. So, from the rational egalitarian foundation of democracy which the original courses provided with the end of discrimination, the new generation departments create an emotional, elitist society controlled by what I think we must seriously consider to be the superstition of evil spirits. I can't go into the tendency of people to turn to myth when rational solutions fail, but I've seen it in the post-Soviet left, and it has sociological support. Ernest Cassirer. Reason has been displaced in the universities, and democracy along with it. Please retweet, follow and share. Thanks.